What's going on, everyone? My name is Steven, and today I'm going to show you every single book that I received during my electrician apprenticeship. And thank you to Upstryve for sponsoring today's video. I'll tell you more about them a little later. So just like the tools that I mentioned in my Tools That New IBEW Electricians Receive for Free video, every single one of these textbooks are given to new apprentices for free upon joining the Inside Electrician Apprenticeship Program with IBEW Local 48. Now, if you find that you're interested in any of these books that I'm showing you today, I will have links to each of these in the description of this video, and I did spend some time to try to find the best possible deals on these books that I could. So without further ado, let's get into this. So first up is the National Electrical Code 2017 edition. This was given to me during boot camp, and it's absolutely crucial to have a code book both as an apprentice and as a journeyman electrician. You can see that I have this thing all tabbed out and marked up as it's received a lot of love during my apprenticeship. If you want to be a good electrician, you have to both understand how to install things and understand code, because it really doesn't matter how good you are at installing things if you're not installing it according to code. The reviews for the code books on Amazon seem to be pretty inconsistent, so if you're interested in picking one of these up, I would highly recommend getting it from the Upstryve bookstore, and I'd also recommend picking some tabs up with it as well. And there'll be a link to the Upstryve bookstore in the description of this video. Next up is Ugly's Electrical References based off of the 2017 NEC. I was actually given two of these 2017 editions during my apprenticeship, and I'm a really huge fan of them. Whether you're a journeyman electrician, apprentice, or even just now in the process of becoming an apprentice electrician, I would highly recommend getting one of these things. Of course, if you're going to be getting one of these things, make sure, just like with a code book, you're getting the most current edition, which at this time is the 2020 edition. The Ugly's Electrical References is great because it takes some of the most common code references and code calculations that you'll use in the field, and they place them all in one little convenient reference book. This book has formulas on things like Ohm's law, pipe bending calculations, short circuit calculations, how to size a transformer, and tons of other useful electrical information. These things are very inexpensive, and again, I'll have the link to this in the video if you're interested in picking one up. Next up is the NJATC's course on Osha Outreach Training, Volume 1. I believe this book was actually given to me during boot camp, and it was part of my Osha 10 certification training. Having been brand new to construction upon starting my apprenticeship, I knew very little about all of the safety information that is found in this book. This book covers all sorts of different topics on things like fall protection, electrical safety, and many other OSHA safety related topics. Next up is actually one of my favorite books given to me during my apprenticeship, which is Code Calculations based off of the 2017 National Electric Code. Now, I can't remember whether or not I got this book in boot camp or first term, but this thing has been a lifesaver for me when it comes to code calculations. And I love the way that they lay everything out in the same order that is laid out in the NEC, making it very easy to follow along and understand. Maybe I just haven't been able to find it, but I unfortunately have not been able to find an updated 2020 version of this code calculations book. But if you're interested in this, I would highly recommend still picking this one up, as it's still a tremendous amount of help when doing code calculations. Another book that I received that's especially helpful for new apprentices is this Conduit Bending and Fabrication book. Conduit bending can be pretty confusing when you're just getting into the trade, and it can take years to master. This also comes with a little quick references guide that you can take with you on the job. It should come as no surprise that this book, paired with a quick references guide, elaborate on conduit bending much more than the Ugly's Electrical References. However, if you're just doing simple and common conduit bending in the field, the Ugly's Electrical References is probably going to be all you need. But if you want to expand on conduit bending and learn a lot more about it, these books are going to be awesome for that. I definitely had sticker shock when I looked this one up on Amazon, so maybe think about shopping around a little bit or even buying this book used if you decide that this is a book that you are interested in. Next up is the book that I probably used the least during my apprenticeship, and that is this Electrical Systems based off of the 2017 NEC. When I was preparing for this video and looking through my textbooks, that's when I realized how cool of a resource this thing really is. And I think that if I took it out every once in a while during my apprenticeship, I definitely could have benefited from reading it. Basically, this is a book that expands on and really complements the NEC, which, if you don't know what that means, NEC stands for National Electrical Code. Where the NEC can be confusing and use hard to understand language, this book really breaks things down in easy to understand language, and it also shows pictures and diagrams, something that the NEC does not do. If you know what the NEC handbook is, this thing is going to be very similar to that, but instead of having the explanations for things, pictures, and diagrams in with the codebook itself, this thing is its own separate book. And I would argue, since it's its own book and it has much more space, it can fit a lot more additional content in it. Alright, so now a book on electrical theory that I received in second term. Here is DC Theory, 3rd edition. If you're just getting into the electrical trade, then I would highly recommend getting this book. Just like the name suggests, this thing really does do a fantastic job of teaching you the ins and outs of DC theory. It covers all sorts of different topics, ranging from magnetism, electrical components, different circuit types, and much more. This is a book that I've actually gone back to many times over the years to refresh myself on the different topics that are covered in this book. So here's a pretty interesting textbook that I received in second term called Applied Codology, Navigating the NEC. Basically, this book explains how the whole NEC is laid out, and it does a fantastic job of teaching you how to be more efficient when navigating code. As mentioned before, the NEC isn't the easiest to read because it's essentially just one big legal document, and understanding the seemingly subtle differences between phrases like shall and shall be permitted are absolutely crucial to understanding code. My biggest takeaways from this book were how to highlight the code in order to navigate it more quickly, understanding how the NEC is organized, and understanding how to find code references based off of keywords. If you're finding this video to be informative so far, would you please consider just completely destroying the like button and also subscribing to my channel if you want to see more content from me. Next up is Transformer Principles and Applications, which I received in third term. The concept of induction and understanding how transformers work is very important as an electrician, especially if you find yourself working in a commercial or industrial setting. And this book really covers it all when it comes to transformers. Operating principles, transformer connections, different types of transformers, installation, troubleshooting, it's all covered in this book. This is another book that I would highly recommend, as you'll likely find yourself coming back to it time and time again over the years. The next book that I also received during the third term of my apprenticeship is Blueprint Reading for Electricians. This book has tons of information regarding blueprints, and the nice thing about it, as the title suggests, is that it is specifically for electricians. My biggest takeaways from this book were things like understanding scaling, different symbols, what things like details and sections are, schedules and specifications, and what different types of electrical plans are. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't love this book, mainly because blueprints just aren't that interesting, right? I'd rather read a book about transformers or DC theory or something more interesting like that. However, if you do want to learn about blueprints and you're an electrician, then this is going to be a fantastic resource for you. Next up is a textbook called AC Theory, which I received in the fourth term of my apprenticeship, which is by far the most math-intensive term of my whole apprenticeship. With the introduction of things like capacitive reactance, vector diagrams, power factor, and so on, AC theory can get very complicated. This textbook covers just about everything I wanted it to on the topic, ranging from the most simple aspects of AC theory to the much more complicated aspects of it. I would definitely recommend both this book on AC theory and this book on DC theory if you're interested in learning more about electrical theory. These are both by the NJATC, as most of these books that I'm showing you today are, and they just do such a good job of diving in and covering all of the important related topics that you're going to want to know as an electrician. Now, before I continue, I want to just take a quick minute to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Upstryve. When it comes to sponsors, I really want to make sure that's something that you, the viewer, are going to find value in and that I would personally use myself. And that's why if you've seen any of my other videos, you've probably seen me talk about Upstryve more than once. Upstryve is awesome, and I would highly recommend them. Let me tell you about them. So one of the services that Upstryve provides is online tutoring for tradesmen. And it doesn't matter what trade you're a part of, if you're in plumbing, HVAC, electrical, roofing, general contracting, whatever, they can set you up with an online tutor that is going to help you be completely prepared and ready to take and pass your trade's state licensing exam. Not only does Upstryve offer online tutoring from licensed trade professionals who are either currently or were previously working out in the field, but they also have tons of other resources. Upstryve is just getting into a mentoring program, they have online courses, and as mentioned before, they also have a bookstore. Here you can see that Upstryve offers different packages for electricians who are going to be taking their Journeyman's or Master's licensing exam. These packages include things like codebooks, tabs, practice tests, study guides, a book for code calculations, one-on-one tutoring, and even access to some of their online code lectures. Regardless of whether or not they're sponsoring this video, you would still hear me talking about Upstryve. So if you have an upcoming state licensing exam, want some tutoring, need some books, or anything else, definitely make sure to check out Upstryve today, and I will have a link to their website in the description of this video. Next up is Applied Grounding and Bonding, which was given to me in my 5th term Grounding and Bonding class. Article 250 of the NEC, Grounding and Bonding, is arguably one of the most important articles for electricians to understand, as not understanding how to install an effective ground fault current path can be the difference between life and death in some cases. I don't have any complaints whatsoever when it comes to this book, as it really seems to cover it all when it comes to grounding and bonding. This is another one of those books that I found myself coming back to time and time again, and I think whether you're an apprentice in school or a journeyman, foreman, general foreman, whatever, out in the field, this is going to be a very valuable resource for you. Now on to the first textbook that I received in my 6th term motor controls class, Fundamentals of Motor Controls. Motor controls is an area of electrical work that I find surprisingly fun, but on the control side of things, there is a lot to learn and understand. This textbook covers all sorts of different things related to motor controls, like control transformers, contactors and motor starters, relays, timers, different types of buttons, and so much more. There is a lot of information to take in with this book, but I found it to be very insightful. I did have a hard time finding this book brand new online, but you might be able to find it used, and if you can find it in good condition, then you actually might end up saving yourself a little bit of money. The second book that I received in my 6th term motor controls class is this textbook called Motors. This book focuses more on the actual motors themselves and less on the control side of things. Man, when it comes to motors, there is so much to learn, and this book really covers everything and more that I could probably ever need or want to know about motors. From the different types of motors, their construction and nameplates, motor protection, troubleshooting motors, starting, braking, and so much more, this book is a well of knowledge. And I think that this book paired with the previously mentioned Fundamentals of Motor Controls pair really well together and cover probably everything that you'll ever want to know about motors and motor controls. In my 7th term class on PLCs, I received this textbook called Introduction to Programmable Logic Controllers. I'll be honest, I found PLCs to be a ton of fun, but if you really want to learn how they work and how to program them, I don't know that reading a textbook is going to be the best way to do that. I think that when it comes to PLCs, you really just need to spend time programming them and actually physically working with them. If you're interested in learning about PLCs, then by all means, check this book out. It does cover a lot of information. But if it's not something that you find particularly interesting, or if it's not an area that you see yourself wanting to eventually specialize in, then I don't know that I would suggest buying this book just because you think it's going to be a good read. Now, 8th term is where we learned about fire alarm, and myself having had the opportunity to do a ton of work with fire alarm out in the field, I found both 8th term class and the textbooks that we received in 8th term to be very insightful. The first book is an actual textbook which is called Fire Alarm Systems. This textbook covers different types of fire alarm circuits, different types of devices, installation, testing, maintenance, and many other topics regarding fire alarm. Overall, I think that this book does a very good job of explaining fire alarm systems. And one thing that is consistently held true is that the more you know you don't know. And when it came to 8th term and reading this book, I was very surprised at how little I actually knew about fire alarm systems. But I've definitely learned a lot from this book and from the class. The second book that I received in 8th term is this NFPA 72 Fire Alarm and Signaling Codebook. If you're learning about fire alarm, installing it, designing systems, or just want to have a better understanding of the code, then this book is an absolute must-have. As an electrician, it's absolutely crucial to have a good understanding of code, and fire alarm is no exception. NFPA 72 is organized differently than the NEC, but after digging in, I found it to be relatively easy to navigate. The third book that I received in 8th term is an updated 2020 edition of the National Electrical Code. And for any of you that are wondering and don't already know this, the NEC releases a new edition every 3 years. making the next version available in 2023. I don't have much to say about this since I already mentioned the 2017 version earlier, but codebooks aren't cheap, and I thought it was really cool that the Training Center purchased new updated codebooks for all of us rather than having us need to buy them ourselves. Again, if you're interested in getting a codebook, I would recommend getting one from the Upstryve bookstore with tabs, which I will have a link to in the description of this video. Now in 9th term, this is a book that I received that's actually more of a workbook than a textbook, but it's called Foreman Development Series Student Workbook. 9th term was about Foreman development, BIM modeling, and OSHA 30. As it was put together by instructors from our local, I don't believe that this book is accessible to anyone outside of Local 48. But if you happen to be going through the apprenticeship with IBEW Local 48, then you will be receiving this, and I found this to have some pretty useful information related to being a foreman inside. Now 10th term, the term that I'm currently in at the time of making this video, is completely focused on preparing for and studying for your Journeyman's licensing exam. And in this class, I received 3 books. The first book is an updated 2020 version of Ugly's Electrical References. In the state of Oregon, this book can be used on our Journeyman's licensing exam as a resource, so that's why they gave us this updated version. Again, with these things having so much good information in them and being so inexpensive, if you're looking into getting just one book today that I'm mentioning, this is probably what I would recommend getting. The next book, or maybe I should say resource, that I was given in 10th term is this Tom Henry's Keyword Index, and oh man, is this thing awesome. The Tom Henry's Keyword Index is basically just a much more expanded version of the index that you'll find in the back of your NEC. And the nice thing about this is it is allowed in the state of Oregon to be used on our Journeyman's licensing exam. So you can bet that I will be using this. If you're not aware of how an index works, it's basically just a list of words in alphabetical order with page numbers to where you can find that specific word in a book. So if you're looking up a very specific word or phrase that you need to find a code reference for, that's what this thing is for, and it will help you locate that word very quickly. I've been doing some studying with a fellow classmate for the upcoming Journeyman's licensing exam. Shout out to Ian if you're watching this video. But one thing that I mentioned to him as we were studying is how using this thing almost feels like cheating, just because it really does make finding code references that much easier. This isn't a completely exhaustive index, meaning it doesn't have every single word that you'll find in the code, but this is much more expansive than the index that you'll find in the back of the NEC. So if you have an upcoming Journeyman's licensing exam and your state allows you to use this, I would highly recommend picking one of them up. The last textbook that I received during my electrician apprenticeship with IBEW Local 48 is another book by Tom Henry's, which is called the 2020 Journeyman Electrician Exam Questions and Answers. A book like this, in my opinion, with mock exams and answers, is, in my opinion, an absolute must-have if you're going to be studying for an upcoming Journeyman's state licensing exam. I really think that one of the best ways that you can prepare for your Journeyman's licensing exam is to spend time digging around in the code. And that is why I like this book so much, because that is exactly what this forces you to do. Now, I don't have any experience with other mock exam question and answer books like this Tom Henry's one, but I would imagine that they're all pretty similar and pretty much accomplish the same thing, which is getting you used to navigating the code. I can say that this book, having over 1,850 actual exam questions with the answers and code references in the back, has definitely met any expectations that I would have for a mock exam prep book, and I would absolutely recommend this one. So, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, every single one of these textbooks were given to me for free during my apprenticeship with IBEW Local 48. If I had to buy every single one of these textbooks by myself without them being provided to me by IBEW Local 48, I would have spent a lot of money on all of these. And actually, if you're watching this video, you went through an apprenticeship and you had to purchase your own textbooks, will you let me know down in the comments how much you ended up having to spend overall for all of those textbooks? Like I mentioned, there's always ways that you can borrow books from websites like Upstryve, that's something they offer, or to buy books used for less money. But I cannot help but just feel incredibly blessed and fortunate to have had the opportunity to go through the electrician apprenticeship with IBEW Local 48 and have all of these books provided for me. This is just one of the many reasons why I would highly recommend that if you are interested in becoming an electrician and going through an apprenticeship program, I would highly recommend doing it with the IBEW. Of course, every IBEW local is going to be different. They're not all going to be giving out free tools and free books like IBEW Local 48 has done. So if this is something that you want to find out whether or not the local that you're interested in applying for does this, I would recommend checking their website, giving them a call, shooting them an email, whatever you got to do to reach out and find this out. If you haven't seen my video on the free hand tools given to me during my apprenticeship, I'll post a link to that in the description, and also a video on why IBEW, other reasons why I would highly recommend going the union route with the IBEW. So links to both of those videos will both be found in the description of this video. And before I end, I want to go ahead and just give one more huge thank you to Upstryve for sponsoring today's video. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be releasing more content showing you exactly what I'm doing to prepare and study for my upcoming Journeyman exam. And you're going to get to see how Upstryve is one of the resources that I'm using and how beneficial it can be to use them when you're preparing for your trade state licensing exam. So make sure you're subscribed to my channel and stay tuned for that content. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out my other social media like Instagram for additional content, and have a good one.